Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight we step down from the rattling world of an 1855 wagon train and into a camp where the winter night arrives like a slow, white animal, breathing frost over the prairie. You stand beside a wooden wagon with iron rims, ropes, and canvas that snaps softly in the wind. An ox exhales a cloud that vanishes almost at once. A child coughs into a quilt, and yes, because this is the coldest winter night on the trail. You probably won't survive this, which is a soothing little bedtime thought, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell us where you're listening from, and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, and feel the day lowering around you as if someone has placed a heavy wool blanket over the sky. You are not arriving at a cheerful campsite with tidy cabins and a lantern glowing in the window. You are arriving at a settlement made for one night only, built from wheels, canvas, tired animals, and people pretending they are less worried than they are. The wagons have been groaning westward for hours, their hubs complaining, their beds packed with flour sacks, bedding rolls, tools, iron pots, coffee, bacon, dried apples, spare shoes, and 1,000 small things that seemed essential back in town. The year is 1855, and overland migration is no longer a tiny experiment whispered about in frontier taverns. A mainstream fact sits quietly beneath this whole scene. Most wagon train travellers walked much of the way, rather than riding all day in the wagon. The wagon is not a cosy carriage. It is a cargo box on wheels. If you sit inside too long, your bones learn every rut in the road, so you have walked and walked and walked again, until the soles of your feet feel stitched to the frozen earth. Now the train slows, the lead wagon creaks to a stop. The others come behind it one by one, each making a different complaint. A chain clinks, a whip cracks. Not cruelly, just enough to remind an animal that the day has not ended simply because everyone desperately wants it to. A woman lifts a corner of the wagon cover and peers out, her face half hidden by a shawl. Men call across the dimming light. Their words disappear into the wind before you catch all of them. The cold does that. It steals language first, then warmth, then good manners. You can smell the camp before it becomes a camp. Damp wool, ox hide, wood smoke from someone's first hopeful fire, grease on an old skillet, the sour, earthy smell of animals that have spent all day pulling human ambition across an indifferent continent. There is also the faint scent of snow, although snow itself barely has a smell. It is more like absence, a clean warning in the air. Your nose prickles. Your eyelashes feel strangely heavy when you breathe in. The cold slides down your throat and settles behind your ribs. The ground under your boots is hard where frost has taken it, then treacherous where wagon wheels have churned mud into frozen ridges. You step carefully, because falling here is not romantic. There is no soft tumble into sparkling snow. There is a bruised hip, a wet sleeve, and 3 people telling you to hurry up because the animals need tending. Such tenderness. Around you, the camp begins to unfold by habit. Oxen are turned and steadied. Children are told to stay close, then told again. Because children in history are mysteriously similar to children now, and often believe instructions are merely weather sounds. Buckets appear. Axes are pulled from wagon beds. Someone searches for dry kindling. Someone else discovers that the kindling is not as dry as advertised, which is the pioneer version of finding your phone at 1% battery. The wagons settle in a loose, practical shape, not always the perfect circle that later paintings love to promise. On many trails, wagons were often arranged according to terrain, herd management, convenience, and wind rather than forming a dramatic fortress every single night. Historians still argue whether the famous circle the wagons image reflects common daily practice or became enlarged by later memory, dime novels, and campfire storytelling, tonight, in this bitter place. The arrangement is less about looking heroic and more about blocking wind, containing animals and keeping people close. The canvas covers lift and sag. Frost is already gathering along the seams, fine as powdered sugar, although no one is in the mood for dessert. Your fingers sting even inside your gloves. You flex them and feel the cloth grow stiff where breath and damp have touched it. A man nearby stamps his boots and mutters about the weather, the trail, and possibly the entire idea of westward travel. Cold has a way of making geography personal. A quirky little detail drifts through the camp's practical misery. Some emigrants brought feather beds, parlour clocks, framed portraits, or other household comforts that seemed sensible while packing and foolish after mud, dust, river crossings, and broken axles. Perhaps tonight someone still has a cherished pillow from home. It seems ridiculous until you imagine sleeping with your cheek against a flour sack in a freezing wagon bed. Then suddenly the pillow becomes civilization itself. The sky darkens from pewter to iron. Grass stems poke through snow crust and tremble in the wind. A few cottonwoods may stand near a creek, their bare branches clicking lightly together. Human voices lower, metal contracts in the cold with tiny ticks. Leather harness groans when moved. You help lift a bundle down from the wagon. It is heavier than it looks, because everything is heavier when you are cold. Nearby, someone laughs at something not especially funny. The tired laugh of people who know the alternative is silence. On a night like this, even a weak joke is a kind of fire. A pot is set near one wagon. A child is wrapped tighter. A dog, if the train has one, circles uncertainly, paws lifting from the frozen ground as if filing a formal complaint. The oxen swing their heads low, their hides rimed along the spine, their patient bodies giving off a heavy animal warmth you can almost envy. Sleep tonight will not be a peaceful descent. It will be a negotiation. You will bargain with cold, noise, hunger, fear, the stubborn lumps beneath your bedding, and the knowledge that morning will ask you to do this all again. For now, you remain standing in the blue-grey edge of evening, watching campfires try to become stars at ground level. Smoke leans sideways, sparks rise and vanish, the wagons settle into shadow, carrying private hopes into public hardship. You have entered the night, but not yet the sleep. First comes the choosing of shelter, the old human question of where to rest when the world is wide, cold, and not especially impressed by you. You move with the others toward the question that matters before any blanket, any supper, any prayer, or any brave little speech about endurance. Where will you sleep tonight? That sounds simple, doesn't it? You find a flat place, stop the wagons, make a fire, and become very historically picturesque. Unfortunately, the prairie has not read the travel brochure. The ground slopes in ways you only notice once a wagon begins to lean. Snow hides holes, stones, old ruts, and frozen clumps of grass. A shallow dip might seem sheltered from the wind, but by morning it can collect icy air like a bowl. A creek bank might promise water, then punish you with mud, thin ice, and animals sliding around as if they have been asked to perform theatre. So you help judge the land with tired eyes. The wagon master, or captain if the train has chosen one formally, walks ahead, looking for water, grass, fuel, and enough room to place the wagons without trapping everyone in confusion. A mainstream historical fact settles into this chilly decision. Many wagon trains elected or appointed captains and agreed on rules before or during the journey, because hundreds of people, animals, and wagons could not simply drift west on good intentions and vibes. Rules decide when to start, when to stop, who stands guard, and how quarrels are handled. Tonight the captain's face is mostly hidden by scarf and beard. He points with a mittened hand toward a low rise beyond a thread of dark water. You follow the gesture. The rise is not high enough to be proud of itself, but it breaks the wind a little. The creek below may offer water if the ice can be broken. A small scatter of leafless trees promises some wood, though every person in camp can already see there is not enough. Everyone politely pretends this is promising. You step off the wagon track and test the ground. Your boot crunches through snow crust and lands on frozen mud beneath. A thin, brittle sound travels up your leg, nearby. A man kneels and scrapes snow away with the back of an axe head, revealing soil hard as fired clay. He nods as though he has discovered a mattress. This is what optimism looks like in 1855. The wind presses at your coat from the north, steady and mean. It finds the gap at your collar with the patience of a debt collector. You turn your back to it and understand why the wagons must be placed carefully. Canvas can block some weather, but it can also catch wind like a sail. A poorly placed camp becomes a flapping, creaking, smoke-filled misery. And you already have plenty of misery scheduled. Families begin to cluster near their own wagons, waiting for the order to settle. You notice how people watch the sky, not casually, not poetically, but with the serious attention modern people give to battery percentages and delayed flights. The clouds are low and colourless. The western edge of the horizon has lost its weak gold. Night will come fast in winter. Daylight is a ration, and everyone is almost out. A quirky tidbit walks in with one of the older travellers, who insists he can read the weather by the behaviour of his corns, his rheumatism, and the way smoke clings to the ground. This may not be peer-reviewed, exactly, but on the trail, folk forecasting travels beside almanacs, experience, superstition, and whatever Uncle Whoever swore by back in Missouri. Someone says a red sunset would have been nice. Someone else says the sunset has clearly decided not to participate. You help guide a wagon toward the chosen ground. The oxen move slowly, great heads dipping, their breath steaming in soft bursts. Their hooves punch into snow and slip slightly on the hidden ice beneath. The driver murmurs to them, not sweetly but steadily, using names they know better than most human advice. The wheels grind over frozen ridges. The whole wagon shudders. Inside, pots clatter, and someone's precious dishes give a tiny doomed chime. The camp must be near water, but not too near. It must be sheltered, but not boxed in. It must leave room for animals. Fires, bedding, cooking, and morning departure. It must not sit under trees likely to drop dead branches in wind. It must allow for guarding the herd. It must also be found before hands go numb and children begin crying from hunger. Simple, really. A relaxing puzzle with frostbite as the penalty. Historians still debate how often emigrant decisions were shaped by formal trail guidebooks versus local knowledge shared among travellers, traders, native people, soldiers, and earlier migrants. You can feel that uncertainty here. Maybe someone has read a guidebook that says where good water lies. Maybe the creek is lower than expected. Maybe a previous camp stripped the wood. Maybe a person who sounded confident at noon is now quietly wrong at dusk. You are told to fetch water before full dark. The creek waits below the rise, narrow and black where the ice has opened in one place. You carry a bucket with another traveller, each of you taking one side of the handle when the path grows slick. The air near the water is colder. It seems to rise from the creek itself, wrapping around your knees. A crust of ice clings to the bank, clouded with trapped bubbles and bits of grass. Breaking ice is louder than you expect. A hatchet strikes. The first blow bounces, The second cracks the surface with a sharp report. Water glimmers underneath. Dark and alive and unwilling to become convenient, you dip the bucket, and the cold bites through your glove where water splashes. By the time you climb back, the bucket's rim is already filming over. Behind you, the wagons continue to settle into position. Voices call left, right, hold, easy now. A baby begins to fuss. A woman answers with a low hum that is more vibration than song. Smoke thickens. The first fires struggle in the wind, sending bitter ribbons across the camp. You smell damp bark, singed grass, and the mineral scent of frozen water. The night ground is not comfortable, but it is chosen. That matters. Humans sleep better when a decision has been made, even a poor one. Your mind can stop scanning the horizon and begin scanning smaller dangers. Where is your bedding? Where will the fire sit? How close are the animals? Which wagon blocks the wind? You set the bucket down near the cook things and look over the rough little village taking shape. It has no walls, no roof, no promise of staying. Yet for one night, this hard rise above a creek becomes home. The cold leans closer, curious, while the wagons begin to turn into a shelter. You stand with your bucket set down near the cook things and watch the wagons begin their slow evening dance. Nothing about it is elegant. The wheels bump over frozen ruts, the oxen lean into their yokes, and the drivers walk beside them with stiff shoulders and voices made low by exhaustion. Still, there is a pattern here, almost like a ritual. By daylight, each wagon is part of a line. By night, each becomes a wall, a pantry, a bedroom, a windbreak, and a small wooden island of privacy in a sea of cold. You help guide one wagon backward by pushing at the rear wheel, though mostly you add moral support and the occasional grunt. The iron tire is so cold it seems to burn through your glove. The hub gives a complaining groan. Someone calls, "A little more." Someone else calls, "Not that much." The oxen ignore both with the magnificent patience of creatures who have heard human disagreement all day. A mainstream historical fact rests beneath the movement around you. The classic covered wagon of the overland trails was often a farm wagon modified for travel. Lighter than the giant Conestoga freighters, and usually covered with canvas stretched over wooden bows. It was not built for luxury. It was built to carry supplies, survive ruts, cross shallow rivers if luck allowed, and make owners believe one more repair would definitely be the last repair. A charming lie, but a necessary one. The wagons are not forming a perfect storybook circle tonight. The ground does not allow perfection. Instead, they settle into a rough crescent and broken oval, angled so the broad sides face the worst of the wind. One wagon sits slightly higher than the others, its canvas snapping like a nervous sail. Another is tucked closer to a neighbour, leaving a narrow passage where people will squeeze through later with blankets, buckets, and bad moods. The animals are meant to be held inside or near the protected space, depending on the terrain and the train's habits. Tonight, everyone wants them close. Too close, perhaps, when you consider the smell. But distance is a luxury the cold does not provide. You step around a wagon tongue lying low in the snow and nearly crack your shin against it. This is another comforting feature of camp life. Every useful object becomes a trap after sundown. Chains hide in shadow. Axes lean where boots will find them. Ropes stiffen and loop like sleepy snakes. A child carries an armload of kindling twice the size of his common sense and drops half of it beside a wheel. No one scolds him for long. Work done badly is still often better than work not done at all. The canvas covers glow faintly from lantern light within. Shadows move behind them, making each wagon look alive, inside one. A woman is rearranging bedding away from a damp corner, inside another. Someone searches for a tin cup with rising irritation. The wagon beds are packed tight with things that must be protected from weather, theft, breakage, and the mysterious trail law that says whatever you need most has rolled beneath something heavy. A quirky tidbit comes rattling along with the cargo. Some emigrants tried to bring stoves, rocking chairs, trunks of books, or even pianos westward, at least part of the way. Before the road taught its usual lesson in subtraction, the trail was famous for making people abandon possessions. The landscape became sprinkled with cast-offs furniture, barrels, broken tools, cracked dishes, and the dreams of people who thought walnut sideboards would enjoy mountain passes. Tonight, though, in this freezing camp, you understand the impulse. A chair would be nice, a stove would be heavenly, a piano would be absurd unless someone could burn it. The men and older boys finish placing the wagons. Women move between them with kettles, bedding, children, and instructions that are more useful than the grand decisions made earlier. The camp is not divided neatly by any modern idea of labour, but much work follows habit. Some tend fires, some unyoke teams, some fetch water, some settle babies, some check wagon wheels and axles for damage. Everyone is tired enough to resent everyone else. Yet the work continues, because survival is excellent at preventing dramatic exits. You hear pins pulled from yokes, chains loosened, leather slapped free of frost. The oxen lower their heads, steam rolling from their nostrils. Their shoulders bear dark, damp patches where the yoke has rubbed warmth into hair and hide. One animal gives a deep sigh so human in tone that several people glance over. You almost apologize to it on behalf of westward expansion. The camp's shape creates small pockets of sound. Near the fires, voices overlap beside the animals. The world is all snorts, hoof scrapes, and the soft tearing sound of hay or dry grass being nosed over. Around the outer wagons, wind moves more freely, tugging at canvas and slipping beneath wagon beds. You can hear the cold in the ropes, in the stiff creak of leather, in the brittle crackle underfoot. Scholars continue to disagree about whether wagon circles were primarily defensive arrangements, livestock pens, practical windbreaks, or a flexible mixture that changed by region, season, and threat. Here, standing in the freezing blue dusk, the answer feels less like one tidy explanation and more like common sense layered over fear. The wagons make a boundary. Boundaries comfort the human mind, even when they are made of wheels and canvas, even when wind can pass through every gap. They tell you where inside begins. You carry a coil of rope toward one of the wagons and help fasten it where a cover has come loose. The canvas is rough under your fingers, stiff with frost along the seam. Someone has patched it with a square of darker cloth, and the stitches stand out like little ridges of frozen thread. Every patch has a story. A branch tore that one near a creek crossing. Sparks from a cook fire burned another. One rip came from a careless child with a knife, though the child insists the knife acted independently. The last wagon settles into place with a lurch. For a moment the entire camp seems to exhale. There is no applause, no ceremony, just the quiet shift from travel to endurance. The road has stopped moving beneath your feet, but the night has begun moving around you. Now the inner space fills quickly. A lantern hangs from a wagon bow. Its flame trembles in the draught. Yellow and small. Bedrolls are pulled down. Feed sacks appear. A skillet clanks against iron. Someone leads animals inward, and the smell grows richer, warmer, and much less poetic. Snow squeaks beneath hooves. A mule flicks its ears as if offended by the whole arrangement. You look across the rough ring of wagons and see faces lit from below by firelight, every cheek hollowed by shadow, every breath visible. This is the temporary village you will trust tonight. It has no church bell, no street, no schoolhouse, no fence, no proper door to close against winter. but it has shape. It has people who know where the tools are. It has animals still standing. It has fire trying to happen. And now that the wagons have made their fragile shelter, another need rises through the cold, older than maps and schedules and trail rules. Warmth. Someone lifts an axe. Someone eyes the thin trees by the creek. Someone else mutters that there is never enough wood. You already know they are right. You follow the sound of the axe before you fully see the person swinging it. The camp has gathered itself into a rough shelter, but shelter without heat is mostly an arrangement of cold objects. The wagons stand in their crescent. The animals shift and breathe, and every person now turns toward the same ancient problem: how to make fire when the world would prefer you did not. The small trees near the creek look promising from a distance. Up close, they are narrow, twisted, and already picked over by previous travellers or by winter itself. The branches are stiff with frost. The deadfall is half buried in snow. You lift a limb and discover it is damp on one side, brittle on the other, and heavier than it has any right to be. The trail has many talents, and one of them is making firewood rare exactly when everyone wants to become best friends with it. You bend with the others, gathering whatever can burn: cottonwood, willow, brush, dry grass, chips shaved from broken packing crates, splinters from a cracked board, anything that seems willing to become flame. In many parts of the overland routes, fuel was a daily concern. Travellers might use wood where they found it, but on open plains they also burned buffalo chips, dried animal dung, because it was available, light enough to gather, and surprisingly useful once dry. There is your peaceful bedtime image, a weary emigrant lovingly collecting prairie fuel like nature's least glamorous candle. Tonight, the cold has made even this task difficult. Your fingers feel thick inside your gloves. When you pick up small sticks, you drop half of them. When you tuck brush under one arm, snow slides down your sleeve. Someone tells you not to take green wood. Someone else points out that the dead wood is wet. A third person contributes the valuable observation that everyone is freezing. History is full of teamwork like this. The axe falls again. A branch cracks with a sharp, satisfying snap. It is passed from hand to hand and dragged toward the wagons, leaving a dark line in the snow. You hear chopping in several places now, uneven rhythms echoing across the creek bank. Metal bites wood, pauses, bites again. The sound is comforting because it means effort is becoming warmth, or at least smoke, which is fire's annoying cousin. Back near camp, the first fire is not so much built as persuaded. A woman kneels low, shielding a nest of dry grass with her body while another traveller strikes flint and steel. Matches existed in the 1850s, including friction matches, but they could be unreliable, costly, or carefully saved. So older methods remained useful in many households and camps. You watch sparks fall into the tinder. Most die instantly. Tiny bright thoughts that give up. One catches. A thread of smoke curls upward. Everyone leans in slightly, as if encouragement has thermal properties. The tinder glows. Someone breathes gently, too hard, and the ember dies. Too little, and it fades. Fire has a personality tonight, and unfortunately it is dramatic. The dry grass blackens, then lifts into a shy flame. Small twigs are laid over it. One collapses too soon. Another smokes sulkily. You can smell the dampness leaving the wood, sour and green. Before any proper heat arrives, your eyes sting, your nose runs. The smoke finds your face with supernatural intelligence, even when you move. Especially when you move. There is an old camp belief, repeated with great confidence, that smoke follows beauty. This may be the closest anyone comes to complimenting you tonight. It is also clearly false, because the smoke follows everyone equally, including the mule. A few fires take hold around the camp, but none is large. Wood is too scarce to waste in grand flames. The fires are low, practical, and guarded. They must cook supper, heat water, warm hands, dry damp mittens, and keep the dark from feeling absolute. They also must not throw sparks onto canvas, bedding, hay, or the kind of possessions that turn a difficult night into a disaster. So you do not get a blazing frontier bonfire, you get a small, smoky, precious circle of heat, and you're grateful for it in a way that makes modern central heating seem like sorcery. Researchers do not entirely agree on how emigrants balance the need for fire against the dangers of exposure, limited fuel, and the constant pressure to conserve supplies on winter journeys. Diaries mention bitter cold, smoky camps, and the scramble for fuel, but each train, route, and season could differ. Tonight, the answer is written in the way people crowd close, then step back when smoke becomes unbearable, then crowd close again because pride is colder than smoke is irritating. You hold your palms toward the fire. At first, nothing happens. Your hands are so cold they feel separate from you, like tools you've borrowed. Then heat reaches the skin. It hurts. A prickling ache climbs into your fingers. You resist the urge to pull away because pain, in this case, means feeling has returned. What a generous arrangement. The front of you warms while your back remains fully enrolled in winter. You turn slowly, roasting yourself like an underfed historical rotisserie. A boy brings more sticks and drops them beside the fire. They hiss where snow melts from the bark. His cheeks are red, his mouth serious. Children on wagon trains worked. They fetched water, gathered fuel, minded younger siblings, helped with animals, picked up buffalo chips, and walked endless miles. Childhood still existed, of course, but it wore heavier boots. A kettle is set near the coals, blackened by many previous evenings. The handle squeaks when lifted. A few frozen drops on its side loosen and run down in shiny threads. Soon water begins to mutter inside, not yet boiling. Just thinking about it, that sound is almost luxurious. A pot waking over fire means coffee, tea, broth, mush, washing, thawing. Some small act of human control over a night that otherwise has all the power. You notice how people gather around each flame in layers. Closest are the ones cooking or tending coals. Behind them stand those pretending they are not trying to get closer. Farther back are shapes moving in and out of shadow, carrying ropes, blankets, feed, wood. The fires do not illuminate the whole camp. They make islands. Beyond their glow, wagon wheels become dark hoops, animals become large breathing silhouettes, and the prairie disappears into a blankness that feels endless. Someone feeds a strip of broken crate into the flames for a moment. The fire brightens, showing faces in sudden detail, chapped lips, tired eyes, frost-silvering hat brims, a smudge of soot on one cheek. Then the brightness shrinks. The cold resumes its patient work. You kneel to arrange another twig, and your knee presses into snow through your trousers. Wet cold blooms instantly. You stand too fast and almost step into the skillet. A nearby woman gives you a look that suggests she has survived worse than you and is not impressed by your performance. Fair. Still, the fire lives. That is the miracle. Not a grand miracle with trumpets, just a little orange one under a black kettle. It snaps softly. It exhales smoke. It makes the nearest wagon canvas glow amber, like a lantern shade. You can hear supper beginning to assemble around it. The scrape of flour, the slice of bacon, the rattle of beans in a tin cup. Warmth has been begged from frozen wood and stubborn hands. Now hunger steps forward, quiet but very persuasive. The smell of supper begins before supper itself. It slides through the smoke in small promises. First bacon fat warming in a black skillet, then coffee starting to darken the water, then flour meeting grease in some plain little marriage of necessity. Nothing about this meal is delicate. Nobody's arranging parsley. Nobody's asking whether the beans are locally sourced, unless by locally sourced they mean they have been riding in a sack beside a spare axle for several hundred miles. You stand close enough to the fire to feel its heat on your shins while the rest of you remains in winter's firm possession. A woman measures flour by habit, not by a neat printed recipe. Her hands move quickly. Even though the cold has reddened the knuckles and made each finger stiff, a tin cup becomes a measuring cup, a knife becomes a scraper, a board balanced on a box becomes a table. The entire kitchen is temporary, smoky, and slightly tilted, which is also a fair description of your emotional condition. For many emigrants crossing the overland trails, staples such as flour, bacon, beans, rice, coffee, sugar, salt, and dried fruit formed the backbone of daily food. Fresh meat or milk might appear when available, and some families carried chickens or milk cows, but most meals depended on stores that could survive heat, dust, jolting, damp, and time. Tonight those stores feel less like provisions and more like a quiet argument against despair. You watch strips of bacon curl in the skillet. The fat spits softly, sending up a smell so rich it makes everyone nearby pretend not to look desperate. Bacon is not just flavour, it is calories, salt, grease for cooking, and comfort wrapped in smoke. When the meat is lifted out, the fat remains, shining black and gold in the pan. Into it goes a simple dough, perhaps biscuits if the cook can manage it, perhaps a rough Johnny cake, perhaps something that began with ambition and ends as edible warmth. The dough hits the skillet with a hush. It browns unevenly because the fire is uneven, the pan is old, and the wind keeps interfering like an unpaid critic. Someone turns it with a knife. A corner breaks off. A child watches that corner with deep spiritual attention. Nearby, a pot of beans, already soaked or boiled earlier if luck and planning allowed, is coaxed back toward heat, if not. You may be in for beans with the texture of pebbles wearing costumes. The trail was not kind to tender cooking. Meals had to fit the rhythm of travel. Long simmering was possible in camp, but only if fuel, time, weather, and patience all arrived together, which they rarely did. On freezing nights, even water takes its time, as if considering whether humanity has earned soup. Coffee becomes the dark star of the meal. Grounds are spooned into a pot, and soon the smell rises, bitter and blessed. 19th century trail coffee was often boiled hard, settled with a splash of cold water, an eggshell, or pure optimism, then poured thick enough to make modern café foam art run away in fear. You receive a tin cup of it, and the heat surprises your fingers through the metal. You shift it from hand to hand. You blow across the top. The steam touches your face like the idea of kindness. A strange little food habit appears at the edge of the fire. Someone has a lump of saleratus, an early chemical leavening, tucked carefully among the stores, used with sour milk, vinegar, or molasses. It could help bread rise before baking powder became more standardized. Too much, however, could leave a bitter, soapy taste. So there you are, on the edge of hypothermia, worrying whether your biscuit has become a household cleaning product. History, as usual, is glamorous. You take your portion when it comes. The food is plain, but the first bite feels enormous. Grease coats your tongue, salt wakes your mouth. The bread is tough at one edge and underdone at another, which gives you variety, if not pleasure. The beans, if you are fortunate, are soft enough to surrender. If you're less fortunate, they resist like tiny frontier patriots. You eat anyway. Hunger improves many recipes and forgives the rest. Around you, the camp quiets into chewing. The conversations that remain are low. Someone asks how far tomorrow's road may run. Someone says the creek crossing ahead might be frozen, which could be good or terrible depending on thickness, weight, and how much the universe enjoys practical jokes. Someone mentions a family farther back on the trail that lost sacks of flour when a wagon tipped in mud. Flour is not glamorous until you imagine losing it. Then it becomes treasure. Food on a wagon train was never only food, it was mathematics. How many pounds remain how many days to the next settlement or trading post? How many mouths? How much can be spared if another family runs short? There are accounts of emigrants overpacking early and dumping goods later, and also of underestimating need with painful consequences. Historians remain divided about how much hardship came from poor planning versus unpredictable trail conditions, bad weather, disease, animal losses, and simple bad luck. Sitting here with your tin cup and hard bread, you suspect the answer is annoyingly all of the above. A child complains that the bacon piece is too small. An adult replies that it is exactly the size of bacon that exists. This logic is difficult to challenge. Another child falls asleep sitting up, bread still in hand, head nodding toward a shawled shoulder. The mother eases the food away before it drops into the dirt, even in this cold, even amid the smoke. Tenderness moves quietly from hand to hand. You notice the different smells layered in the air: burnt flour, bacon grease, coffee, wet wool steaming near the flames, ash, oxen, the sharp scent of metal cups, a faint sweetness from dried apples someone has warmed in a small pot, perhaps for a sick child, perhaps for morale, which on a night like this is also a medical need. The apples swell and soften, releasing a memory of orchards, cellars, kitchens, autumn hands peeling fruit beside a window, for a moment. The camp is not only going west, it is carrying east inside it. You scrape the last bit from your cup or plate, careful not to waste crumbs. Your stomach is not full in any modern holiday sense. It is simply quieter. That is enough. Supper has placed a small weight inside you, a warm centre to guard against the night. The dishes must still be cleaned, because even at the edge of frozen misery, chores remain loyal. A skillet is wiped with a scrap, perhaps sanded with ash or snow, then set aside. Cups are rinsed sparingly, leftovers. If any survive the appetites around the fire, are covered or stored. Food must be protected from damp, animals, and the casual nibbling habits of both children and adults who think nobody sees them. The fire sinks lower, coffee grounds settle, bacon scent lingers like a better world. You step back from the flames and feel the cold rush into the space supper briefly occupied. Beyond the wagons, animals shift and stamp, waiting for their own care. Their hunger matters too. Their warmth matters. Their survival is the difference between movement and being stranded in a beautiful, deadly emptiness. So you tuck your hands beneath your arms, swallow the last bitter trace of coffee, and turn toward the breathing shapes in the dark. You turn from the fire with bacon still faint on your breath and step toward the animals, because no matter how tired the people are, the camp cannot sleep until the teams are settled. The oxen, mules, horses, and perhaps a milk cow or two stand in the dim firelight like large, breathing pieces of the night. Steam rises from their nostrils, frost has gathered along their backs. Their ears twitch at every creak of leather and every voice moving through the camp. You are tempted to think of them as background, just part of the scenery, like wagon wheels and kettles and the dramatic misery of cold toes. But on a wagon train, animals are not scenery. They are engines, companions, investments, alarms, and sometimes the difference between reaching the next valley or watching your entire plan become a frozen roadside exhibit. Oxen were widely used on overland journeys because they were strong, relatively steady, cheaper than horses, and could often survive on rough forage where a more delicate animal might decline the invitation. Slow. Yes. Glamorous. No. Reliable. Often, and reliability becomes beautiful after the first 100 miles. You help loosen a yoke from a pair of oxen whose names you have heard all day. Maybe Buck and Bright, maybe Duke and Berry. People name working animals with a strange mix of affection and practicality, as if the right name can persuade a creature to pull half a household across a continent. The wooden yoke lifts free with effort. Beneath it, the animals' necks are damp and warm, the hair flattened where weight and movement have pressed all day. One ox turns his head, huge eye reflecting firelight, and looks at you with the calm disappointment of a school teacher. The gear must be checked even in the cold. A sore under a strap can worsen by morning, a cracked harness can break on the trail, a loose shoe, a swollen joint, a raw patch, a hidden cut from ice or brush, all of these matter. Your fingers move over leather stiff as bark, a buckle resists, you tug harder, and when it finally gives, your knuckles smack against a metal ring. You say nothing heroic, you just breathe sharply through your nose and pretend the pain is educational. Nearby, someone rubs an animal's shoulder with a handful of dry grass. Another traveller checks who, lifting one heavy foot at a time. It is awkward work. The animal shifts, and everyone becomes suddenly polite. A mule swings its head around as if considering whether you are necessary. Mules, with their famous mixture of strength, sense, and personal opinions, were valued by many travellers, though not always loved in the tender poetic way people love horses. A mule can appear to understand everything you want and still choose another vision for the evening. There is feed to manage, if grass is available. Animals may graze, but winter has hidden much of it under snow and ice. Hay and grain are precious. Too much used tonight means less for another night. Too little, and the animals weaken. You watch a man open a sack and measure out grain with care so intense it might as well be medicine. The animals push their noses forward. Their breath warms your wrist for a moment, damp and grassy and oddly comforting. A curious bit of trail life shows itself in the way some travellers treated oxen almost like weather instruments. They watched whether animals turned their tails to the wind, refused feed, huddled tightly, or grew restless before a storm. Was it science? Not exactly. Was it useless? Also, not exactly. Animals notice pressure, scent, sound, and discomfort before humans admit anything has changed on a night like this. If the oxen become uneasy, you pay attention, because pride has never been as good at survival as a cold animal's nerves. The camp's protected space fills with low animal sounds. Hooves scrape frozen earth, a chain clinks softly, a cow lets out a tired, hollow call. And somewhere a child answers with a sleepy imitation that earns one small laugh from the adults. The laugh fades quickly, but it was there. Even hardship leaves little cracks where humour leaks through. You help lead a pair of animals closer to the wagons, where the wind is weaker. Their bodies give off a dense warmth, not cosy exactly, but real. You can feel it when you pass near their flanks. The smell is stronger here, earthy and sour, mixed with hay, leather, dung, and frost. It is not pleasant in the tidy parlour sense, but it is alive on the coldest night. Alive becomes its own fragrance. Some families bring milk cows, hoping for fresh milk along the way. Though the trail often has other plans, a cow may provide comfort, nutrition, and a reminder of home. But she also needs feed, water, protection, and patience. Tonight, one stands with her head low, tail still, ribs moving slowly beneath a hide rimmed with frost. Someone has thrown a blanket or old cover over part of her back, though keeping cloth on an animal can be its own puzzle. The wind loves loose fabric. Animals love stepping on things. Together. They're a comedy written by people who hate sleep. Specialists still puzzle over how emigrants weighed sentiment against practicality when deciding which animals to bring and which to sell. Trade, or abandon along the route. Diaries tell of attachment, frustration, financial calculation, and grief. All tangled together. You can feel that tangle now, an ox's property. Yes, it is also the creature whose steady pace has shaped your day from sunrise to dark. Its breath has marked the hours. Its fatigue has become your schedule. You may not write poems to it, but you notice when it shivers. Water must be brought for the animals too, and this is unpleasant enough to deserve its own small cloud of resentment. Buckets are carried from the creek, where the ice has already begun to close again. A man breaks it with a pole. The crack echoes faintly. Water sloshes onto mittens. Someone curses under their breath in language too muffled to trouble bedtime standards. The animals drink slowly, muzzles dark and wet, steam rising from the buckets. Some hesitate at the cold water. Others drink greedily. Each bucket feels heavier on the return because your hands know what is coming. The firelight makes the animals' shadows enormous on the wagon canvas. Horns stretch. Long ears flick like strange flags. A horse stamps and tosses its mane, nervous at sound beyond the camp. Everyone pauses. You listen too. Wind, canvas, a branch ticking. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. On the trail. Animals often notice danger first, but they also notice harmless things with great drama. A mule can save your life or panic because a blanket moves suspiciously. Both talents are part of the package. Gradually the animals settle, not peacefully, not completely, but enough. Ropes are checked, feed is placed. Blankets are adjusted where families can spare them. The herd is brought close under watch. The oxen stand with heads lowered. The mules angled away from the wind. The horses shifting in place. The cow breathing slowly into the dark. Their warmth seems to thicken the center of the camp. You step back, rubbing your hands together, and look from the animals to the wagons. The camp is held together by these breathing bodies as much as by wood, iron, rope, or willpower. Without them, the morning road cannot happen. With them, tomorrow is possible, which is not the same as easy, but it is something. Behind you, the fires have sunk lower. Ahead, the wagon canvas waits, stiff and pale in the darkness. The animals are fed and guarded. Supper has settled. The cold has sharpened. Now your own bed must be found, assembled, negotiated with, and somehow trusted. You turn toward the wagon that must become your bedroom, though bedroom is a generous word for a wooden box on wheels with canvas over it, and winter pressing its face against every seam. The animals are settled as well as animals ever settle. The fires have shrunk to watchful coals, and supper has become a warm memory fading inside your stomach. Now comes the delicate art of lying down without freezing, crushing someone's foot, or discovering that your blanket has spent the day absorbing dampness like a sponge with personal ambition. The wagon bed waits above you, packed tightly with bundles, sacks, tools, and the private geography of one family's survival. Every object has been placed somewhere for a reason, then shaken all day until reason became guesswork. You climb carefully, one boot on a wheel hub, one hand gripping the sideboard. The wood is cold and rough. A splinter catches at your glove. Inside, the canvas curves overhead in a pale tunnel. Dimly lit by the glow of a lantern outside, it smells of flour dust. Old wool, leather, dried apples, iron, and the faint mousy odour of belongings that have been shut away from sunlight too long. Sleeping arrangements on the overland trails varied widely. Some people slept inside wagons, especially children. the ill, or those guarding delicate supplies. Others slept underneath the wagon, beside it, in small tents if they had them, or under open sky when weather allowed, on a night like this. The open sky is not making a persuasive case. Even so, there may not be room for everyone inside. The wagon is full, and comfort must politely stand aside while cargo takes the best space. You pull bedding from a roll tied near the rear, quilts, blankets, a buffalo robe if the family's lucky, perhaps a feather tick brought from home and now treated with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics. The bedding is not fluffy in the modern hotel sense. It is lumpy, stiff, and faintly smoky. It has collected dust from dry days, damp from river crossings, and the smell of every campfire it has ever known. Still, you touch it with gratitude. On this night, a quilt is not decoration. It is a wall between your skin and the century. You spread the first layer over the wagon floor, but the floor is not even. Boards run lengthwise, each one announcing itself through the bedding. Beneath them are wheels, axles, and frozen air. A wagon bed lifted off the ground may seem safer from snow, but cold rises into it from every side. The canvas cover holds some warmth, yet it also gathers condensation from breath. By morning, frost can cling inside the cover, turning the wagon into a tiny weather system with luggage. You notice nails. Of course there are nails, not large dramatic nails, but small historical villains, half hidden along a board edge or near a repaired bracket. One snags the corner of a blanket. You tug gently, because tearing bedding tonight would be a tragic little opera. Nearby, someone whispers that the flour sack must stay dry. Someone else says the children need more cover. A third voice asks where the extra socks went. The answer, naturally, is that nobody knows, although everyone remembers packing them. One odd little sleeping trick passed from traveller to traveller is to warm a stone near the fire and wrap it in cloth for the bed. Done carefully, it can hold heat for a while. Done carelessly, it can scorch fabric, burn feet, or fill the wagon with the scent of singed wool and regret. Perhaps someone tucks such a wrapped stone near the foot of the bedding tonight, checking it with cautious fingers. It is not a hot water bottle. It is a frontier foot warmer with legal concerns. You settle a blanket near the side, then immediately feel a draft slide between the boards and under your hip. You shift, the draft follows. You shift again. A sack of beans now presses into your ribs. You begin to understand that sleeping in a wagon is not about finding comfort. It is about selecting the most tolerable discomfort and developing loyalty to it. Outside, the camp continues in low sounds. A rope creaks, an ox exhales. Someone coughs near another wagon. A child complains in a whisper and is answered with a soothing hush. The fires make small clicking noises as coals collapse inward. Wind moves across the canvas roof, stroking it with a dry, restless hand. The whole wagon trembles slightly when a stronger gust hits. Not enough to move it, just enough to remind you that your shelter is portable, which is comforting in daylight and less charming at midnight. Experts still question how much privacy families truly had in camp, especially during bad weather when people crowded under canvas, near fires, or in shared sheltered spaces. Diaries often speak of hardship, sickness, fatigue, and togetherness. But they do not always capture the awkward closeness of bodies trying to sleep beside supplies. Children, boots, pans, damp blankets, and the occasional suspicious smell. You feel the answer in your elbows. Privacy is not absent. Exactly. It is folded very small and tucked somewhere behind a flour barrel. You remove your outer boots only if you dare. This is a serious calculation. Boots worn to bed are uncomfortable, dirty, and damp. Boots removed may freeze stiff by morning, transforming into leather sculptures of your poor choices. Some travellers slept with footwear close to the body or wrapped in cloth to keep it from hardening completely. Tonight, you loosen yours, wipe off snow as best you can, and place them where you can find them in darkness. That is the theory. In practice, darkness loves moving boots. The bedding fills slowly with people, not dramatically, not with cosy laughter, but with careful negotiation. A child is placed near the warmer centre. An older person gets an extra folded quilt under one shoulder. Someone keeps a cap on. Someone else wraps a shawl around the neck before lying down. You slide beneath the top blanket and feel the first shocking cold of fabric against your legs. Then, slowly, your own body begins the humble work of warming its little cave. The blanket smells of smoke and wool grease. It scratches your chin. You pull it higher anyway. Your breath gathers beneath the edge for a moment, warm and damp. Then you turn your face out because you must breathe air that does not taste like laundry and panic. The cold kisses your nose instantly. Very rude, very historically accurate. Under you, the wagon boards press through the bedding. At your side, a bundle of tools knocks softly whenever the wagon rocks in the wind. Above you, frost thickens along the canvas seams. Each breath from the sleepers adds invisible moisture. Each gust outside searches for a way in. The small space grows quieter as people surrender one by one to the effort of resting. You do not fall asleep yet. Your body's too alert, counting discomforts, feet cold, shoulder sore, nose freezing, something sharp near the knee, someone's elbow close to your blanket. Yet there is also a strange safety in the closeness, in the breathing around you, in the faint animal warmth drifting through the camp, in the knowledge that the wagons are circled or curved or clustered against the night. You have made a bed out of cargo and fabric, a room out of canvas, a shelter out of stubbornness. Outside, the fires sink further. Inside, you hold still, trying not to lose the warmth you have made. The cold has not left. It waits at the edges, patient and clever, and beneath all the quilts and shawls and robes, you begin to understand that the next defense is clothing itself, layer upon layer, imperfect, itchy, necessary, and never quite enough. You lie under the blankets and become aware of your clothing in the way people only do when every layer has failed them personally. During the warm part of the day, your coat felt heavy, your scarf itched, your mittens were always in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Now, in the narrow cold of the wagon bed, every scrap of cloth becomes part of a quiet defense, and you begin to judge each garment with the seriousness of a general inspecting a fort before siege. The first rule is simple: stay dry. The second rule is that the first rule is almost impossible. Your hem has brushed snow, your cuffs have collected frost, your stockings may be damp from sweat, creek water, or the mysterious trail moisture that appears without permission. Wool can still insulate somewhat when damp, which is one reason wool clothing mattered so much in cold climates. But somewhat is doing a lot of work tonight. Damp wool against skin is not a lullaby, it is a cold. Patient lecture. You curl your feet and feel your stockings bunch inside themselves. If you have a second pair, you may pull them on over the first, unless the extra pair has gone missing in the grand household puzzle of the wagon. People in the 1850s wear layers of linen, cotton, wool, leather, fur, or knitted goods according to money, region, habit, and what could be packed. There is no lightweight thermal base layer from a cheerful outdoor store. There is no miraculous waterproof shell. There is you. Your socks, and a prairie wind that is clearly trained for this moment. You tug your coat closer around your ribs. The fabric is stiff where damp has frozen near the edges. If it is wool, it carries a dense smell, smoky and animal and human all at once. If there is a shawl, it is wound over shoulders and perhaps across the head. Women often wore shawls, hoods, bonnets, and layered skirts or petticoats, while men might rely on coats, waistcoats, wool shirts, hats, scarves, and heavy trousers. But camp practicality can blur neat descriptions. On a night this cold, nobody's posing for a fashion plate. People wrap, pin, tie, tuck, and borrow whatever can reduce the feeling of being slowly converted into ice. There is a small indignity in sleeping in so many clothes. Seams press into your skin, buttons catch under your shoulder, a belt buckle finds your hip and makes itself known like a tiny metal tyrant. Your collar scratches, your scarf crawls upward until it seems determined to become part of your mouth. You shift, and the whole bedding arrangement shifts with you. Someone beside you sighs, which is trail language for please stop moving before I reconsider our entire relationship. One peculiar survival habit, common in many cold households and camps, is sleeping in a cap. It sounds quaint until you try not doing it. A nightcap, hood, scarf, or wrapped shawl helps hold warmth around the head and ears, even though the old claim that most body heat escapes through the head is too simple. Heat leaves wherever the body is exposed. Tonight, your nose would like to submit evidence. You pull the cloth lower around your brow and leave only enough face uncovered to breathe. A glamorous look? No, a necessary one, absolutely. You think of gloves. If you sleep with them on, your fingers may be warmer, but any dampness inside them will linger if you take them off. Your hands can curl together beneath the blanket. But you must find the gloves again before morning. A lost mitten at dawn is not a small matter. It is a personal tragedy with frost around the edges. You tuck your mittened hands beneath your arms and let the heat from your body gather there. The wool smells of smoke, bacon, and wet leather. Comfort has become a complicated scent. Outside the wagon, the wind passes over the canvas with a dry hiss. The cover lifts slightly, then settles. A thread of air slips through a seam and traces the back of your neck. You pull the blanket higher. The blanket traps your breath for a moment, and the damp warmth fogs your lips. You lower it again, irritated by the need for oxygen. Breathing is very demanding. People sometimes imagine historical clothing as automatically warmer because it looks heavy. The truth is less comforting. Heavy fabric can help, especially layered wool, but fit, dryness, wind resistance, and footwear matter enormously. A loose gap at the wrist can undo a surprising amount of effort. A wet boot can chill the whole body. A skirt edge stiff with snow can become a cold weight. A coat that works well while walking may fail while lying still because movement no longer produces heat. The body that trudged all day now has to warm itself at rest, with fewer calories than it wants, and a night that seems proud of its sharpness. Those who study clothing and trail life still differ on how to read emigrant diary complaints about cold. There were some writers describing rare extremes, ordinary hardship, or the shock of middle-class families discovering how little their familiar clothing meant in exposed country. The answer shifts from page to page, yet here, inside the wagon. You do not need a footnote to understand the problem. You need another pair of dry socks, and history has declined. Your legs are wrapped beneath the blanket, but the lower half of your body seems farther away than usual. Toes become distant relatives. Knees ache where the day's walking has settled into them. You flex your feet slowly, careful not to kick the person beyond you. A warm stone wrapped in cloth sits near the bedding's foot, if your wagon has one, and every foot in the area is aware of it. Quiet diplomacy occurs under the blanket as several sleepers attempt to share its fading heat without admitting it. A fringe bit of domestic wisdom drifts through your memory. Some families believed rubbing feet with grease or wearing certain charms could help against cold, cramps, or illness. Maybe someone in camp swears by goose grease on chapped skin. Maybe another prefers camphor, mustard, or a flannel strip tied just so. Some remedies help a little, Some mostly smell determined, and some exist because doing the right thing feels better than lying still and listening to your teeth consider percussion. You press your chin into your scarf and count layers: shirt, waistcoat or bodice, coat, shawl, blanket, quilt, perhaps robe. Still the cold searches. It comes through the wagon floor, under the canvas edge, around your boots, into the pause between breaths. It reminds you that clothing is not a wall, it is a delay, a good delay, a beloved delay, but only a delay. And yet, slowly, the layers begin to do their modest work. Your trapped body heat gathers. The first shock of the bedding fades. The wool loses its icy bite. The space under the quilt becomes less hostile. You stop shivering in hard bursts and begin to tremble only now and then. The camp sounds soften. Harness creaks become slower. Hooves scrape less often. Someone whispers a final complaint about frozen stockings, and then even that complaint grows sleepy. You remain awake, wrapped like a parcel nobody wants delivered until spring. Your clothing scratches, squeezes and smells of the road. But it is yours. It is the thin, stitched border between you and the coldest night. Beyond the wagon, someone is taking the first watch, stepping carefully between animals and shadows, while inside the cloth around you holds what warmth it can. Beyond the layered darkness of your bedding, someone is awake because someone must be. The camp has narrowed to breath, canvas, coals, and the slow shift of animals. Yet the night is not trusted. It is listened to. It is measured. It is taken in turns. You lie still under wool and quilt while the first watch moves between wagons, and you understand, without needing anyone to explain it. That sleep on the trail is never fully private. It belongs to the whole camp, and the whole camp must guard it. The person on watch passes near your wagon. You hear the soft crush of boots and snow, then a pause, then another careful step. The sound is small, but in the cold it travels clearly. A lantern is hooded or kept low, because too much light spoils night vision and wastes fuel. Firelight is enough to show the nearest wheels, the tied animals, the dark curve of a wagon cover. But beyond that, the prairie has erased itself. The world outside camp is a deep, flat absence. On overland journeys, night watches were often assigned to guard livestock, watch for weather changes, and keep an eye on camp safety. Animals could stray, be stolen, panic, or break loose, and losing a team might be more devastating than losing almost anything else. In popular memory, guards are often imagined only as defenders against dramatic attacks, but most nights, the urgent task is humbler. Keep the oxen close. Keep the mules from inventing trouble. Keep the fires safe. And notice danger before it walks into the bedding. You hear a rope tighten and creak. One of the oxen shifts its weight, hoof scraping frozen ground. Another exhales with a deep, foggy snort. The watchman murmurs something low, perhaps a name, perhaps a warning, perhaps just a human sound meant to settle both animal and self. The night absorbs it. Inside the wagon, the sleepers around you make tiny adjustments. A child sighs through a stuffy nose. Someone turns very slowly, trying not to wake others, but the boards betray every movement. Your shoulder has found a ridge beneath the bedding and formed a formal disagreement with it. You consider moving, then decide the current pain is familiar, while a new position might introduce fresh atrocities. This is mature decision-making. Frontier edition. The cold presses harder now. It seems to deepen after full dark, no longer sharpened by activity or the memory of fire. Frost forms where breath meets canvas. A thin sparkle spreads along the seams overhead, every now and then. A bit of frozen moisture loosens and falls with a faint tick onto a blanket or crate. You blink in the darkness and listen to it. A private indoor snowfall, charming, in the way that a leaking roof is charming when painted later by someone warm. A strange trail habit appears in the watch schedule. Some camps used informal signals, whispered names, or small rotations by family or mess group, depending on size and organisation. In a few accounts, men drew lots or followed posted guard lists. In others, the system seems to have depended on whoever could still stand upright after supper. Human institutions are flexible that way. Tonight, the watch has a practical rhythm. One person walks, one waits to be woken, another pretends to be asleep while dreading their turn. There are fears, of course. Some are realistic. Wolves may circle at a distance, drawn by scent, though they usually avoid people unless bowled from hunger or opportunity. Weather can worsen. A fire can send sparks into bedding or canvas. Animals can bolt. A stranger might approach. In some regions, tension between emigrants and native peoples shaped real danger and real fear, often worsened by misunderstanding, trespass, competition for resources, and the violence of American expansion. But there are also imagined fears, which do not require evidence. Darkness supplies them free of charge. People who study trail diaries still wrestle with how to interpret nighttime fear in emigrant accounts. Was it mainly a response to actual risk, to rumours passed along the route, to later edited memories, or to the uneasy conscience of travellers moving through lands already known, used, and defended by native nations? The question does not sit neatly. It breathes in the silence beyond the wagons. You feel how fear can be practical and unfair at once, sharp for real reasons and shaped by stories people carry with them. The watchman stops again. You hear him near the animals. A mule has lifted its head. Its ears point toward the dark, and for a few seconds the camp seems to hold one breath. You strain to hear. Wind slides over snow crust. A branch near the creek taps another branch, slow and hollow, far away. Perhaps there is a faint yip or cry, so thin it might be imagination. The mule snorts. Someone whispers from another wagon, "What is it?" No one answers right away. Then the oxen settle. The mule lowers its head, offended but not alarmed enough to continue. The watchman moves on. The camp exhales again, one blanket at a time. You notice how sound changes at night. During the day, wagon wheels and voices fill everything. At supper, fire and work make a busy circle. Now each little noise becomes important. Canvas snapping lightly, a cough muffled in wool, a kettle cooling with a metallic tick, hooves, rope, breath. Your own heartbeat when you lie on one ear. The prairie, which seemed wide and open at dusk, now presses close, made of sounds without shapes. A second figure appears outside, called from sleep to take a turn. You hear the low exchange between guards. No ceremony, just a few practical words, animals quiet. Wind rising, creek ice closing. Keep the coals banked. Wake the next man before the moon drops behind cloud. Perhaps they stamp their feet and blow into their hands. Perhaps one accepts a swallow of leftover coffee gone nearly cold, because even bitter mud water can feel like mercy when you're about to walk the edge of camp alone. The departing guard crawls back toward his bedding, bringing cold with him like a cloak. Somewhere nearby, people shift to make room. The new guard begins the circuit. His steps sound different. He is heavier, or more tired, or less careful. The snow complains under him. He pauses by a wagon wheel and knocks ice from his boot heel with the toe of the other boot. You stare into darkness and discover that you are almost asleep, then suddenly not asleep at all. That is how trail nights behave. They pull you down gently, then hand you a noise. A rope creaks too sharply. A child mutters. A cow shifts. Wind pushes the canvas. Each time, your mind rises, checks the world. and sinks again. Sleep becomes a shallow pond, easily disturbed. Yet there is comfort in the watch. Someone is up, someone is listening so others may rest. That knowledge spreads through the camp more warmly than the coals. You tuck your mittened hands closer beneath your arms and let the sounds become less like warnings and more like a pattern. Step, pause, hoof, breath, canvas, coal, step, pause, wind, whisper, stillness. The night remains uneasy, but not empty. It is filled with tired human duty, animal warmth, and the fragile agreement that everyone will help everyone reach morning, beyond the canvas. The guard turns again through the dark, inside. You drift nearer to sleep, carried not by silence, but by the small, watchful noises of a camp refusing to disappear. You drift near sleep while the watchman circles outside, but the camp itself does not become silent. It simply changes its voice by day. It is a thing of wheels, shouts, hooves, and orders by night. It becomes smaller and more human. Words soften. Complaints lose their sharp edges. A joke, if it appears, travels under blankets like a warm coal. This is the hour when the wagon train feels least like a procession and most like a temporary village, one made of people who did not necessarily choose one another, yet now depend on one another completely. You lie in the cramped wagon bed and listen as the sleepers around you settle into their own rhythms. One breath whistles faintly, another catches now and then in a cough. Someone's wool sleeve rasps against a quilt. Beyond the canvas, a woman murmurs to a restless child. The words are too quiet to catch, but the tone is familiar across centuries there. There. Hush now. Morning will come. It is the same promise people have offered children in every cold century, even when they were not entirely sure morning would behave. Wagon trains were often made of families, neighbours, hired hands, single men, widows, children, and sometimes people who joined for only part of the journey. They formed their own little societies on the move, with rules, friendships, rivalries, shared labour, and gossip. Because humans can create a social world almost anywhere. Give them a trail, a few dozen wagons, and insufficient coffee. And soon there will be committees, alliances, hurt feelings, and someone everyone agrees is difficult. Tonight, that social world is folded into darkness. Near one fire, now mostly coals, two women speak in low voices while repairing a torn mitten or mending a child's stocking. Their needles catch what light remains. The work is tiny and stubborn. Clothing tears, buttons loosen, seams fail, and every failure matters more in winter. One woman whispers something that makes the other suppress a laugh. The laugh comes out as a short breath, quickly hidden, because waking babies is a danger no camp constitution can solve. A few wagons over, someone prays, not loudly, not as a performance, but in a voice meant for the people tucked close nearby. The prayer names the cold, the animals, the sick, the road, and perhaps the home left behind. Religion travelled west in trunks, hymn books, memory, and habit. Some emigrants held formal Sunday services when conditions allowed, while others relied on private prayer, scripture reading, or songs carried from home on a night like this. Theology may be complicated, but the request is simple. Keep us through the dark. You hear a hymn begin, barely more than breath, one line, then another. A second voice joins, not strong but steady. The melody is familiar to some, unknown to others, and comforting even to those who do not sing. Music in camp can be practical medicine. It covers fear. It paces breathing. It reminds people that they are more than bodies wrapped in damp wool. Then the hymn fades because cold makes singers modest, and because nobody has spare energy for a concert. There are also jokes, because hardship and humour have a long marriage. Someone grumbles that the beans at supper were so firm they could be loaded into a rifle, which is not safe advice, just frontier food criticism. Another person says the coffee was strong enough to pull a wagon alone. A third adds that if coffee can pull, they should yoke it beside the oxen at dawn. This is not sparkling theatre. Perhaps, but you smile under your blanket. The laugh is small, and the smallness is part of its beauty. An odd social custom appears in the way people share warmth without announcing it. A child is passed into a warmer nest of blankets. A widow is offered a place closer to the inner side of a wagon. Someone who complained all afternoon about a neighbour singing now hands that neighbour an extra scrap of cloth to wrap around a drafty corner. On the trail, kindness often looks like an object moved 6 inches in the dark. Not all closeness is sweet. The camp is full of frayed tempers. A man mutters that another family always chooses the best fire spot. Someone resents borrowed flour not yet repaid. Someone believes a driver mistreated an animal. Someone else thinks the captain favours his own friends. Wagon train life forced cooperation among people who might have avoided one another in town. Here, avoidance is difficult when your rival's mule is breathing into your breakfast area. Researchers continue to parse emigrant diaries for the real texture of these moving communities, asking how much daily cooperation softened class, gender, and regional divisions, and how much those divisions remained firmly in place beneath the shared hardship. The evidence can point both ways. You can feel both answers in the camp tonight. People help one another because they must. They also judge one another because they are people. And the cold has not cured that condition. A little farther away, a young woman writes in a diary by poor light. If her ink has not thickened too much and her fingers can still manage the pen, many trail diaries were kept by women, men, and older children, recording weather, mileage, births, deaths, river crossings, chores, quarrels, jokes, and homesickness. Some entries are plain as fence posts. Cold night, oxen tired, made 10 miles. Others opened suddenly into grief or wonder. Tonight she might write only a few words before the cold wind's very bitter. Little sleep, wind high, later. Those words may be all that remains of this night. There is courting too, even here, because life is unreasonable and persistent. A young man finds an excuse to pass near a certain wagon, checking a rope that is already checked. A girl inside hears his boots and does not look out, which may mean nothing or everything in such cramped communities. Attention travels fast, a shared cup, a borrowed shawl, a hand offered at a creek crossing. All can become material for whispers. Romance on the trail has mud on its hem and frost on its eyelashes. But it still knows how to appear. Children form their own small republic, half asleep under adult control. Earlier they may have gathered chips, chased one another between wagons, quarrelled over biscuits, and asked questions at precisely the wrong moment. Now they sleep in piles, cheeks flushed, hair damp at the temples, hands curled around scraps of blanket. One child murmurs about home, another dreams aloud of pancakes. A mother smiles in the dark, perhaps because pancakes are impossible. Perhaps because the dream itself is warm. You feel the camp's loneliness too. It is not erased by company. Each person carries a private map, a kitchen left behind, a grave visited before departure, a sister never seen again, a farm hoped for, a debt escaped, a letter tucked in a Bible, a fear not spoken aloud. The wagon train binds these people together, but each heart still travels separately. You sense that in the pauses between voices, the silence after a joke, the held breath after a cough, the way someone says a name and then stops. The watchman passes again, and the social sounds grow thinner. Prayers ended, the mending is folded away, the diary is closed, the last joke dissolves into a tired snort. yet the camp remains woven together by more than ropes and wagon tongues. It is held by favours remembered, duties shared, quarrels postponed, lullabies offered, and the quiet understanding that nobody reaches morning alone. You sink deeper into the blankets. The boards beneath you have not softened. The cold still presses along your nose and toes, but the voices have made a kind of shelter too, one that canvas cannot provide. Around you, this small winter village breathes, mutters, dreams, worries, and endures, and somewhere nearby, beneath a quilt pulled carefully over a child's chest, a cough begins again. The cough begins softly, almost politely, as if it is asking permission to disturb the wagon. Then it returns, deeper this time, and the body behind it struggles for warmth under a heap of blankets. You lie still, listening with the rest of the dark, in a camp like this. Illness is never one person's private matter. A cough moves through canvas. A fever changes tomorrow's pace. A toothache can keep half a family awake. A sore foot can become a problem for an entire wagon. The body is very personal until it slows the train. Someone shifts near the sick child, or perhaps the sick mother, because the sound is hard to place through wagon covers and wind. A cup is lifted, liquid sloshes faintly, there is whispering. The words are ordinary: sit up, just a sip, breathe slow, you're all right. They are spoken with the careful firmness people use when they are trying to convince both the patient and themselves. Medical care on an 1855 wagon train is a fragile mixture of household knowledge, folk remedies, patent medicines, prayer, luck, and whatever experience a traveller may happen to possess. A trained physician might be travelling with a train, but often there is no doctor at hand, and even if there is, 19th century medicine has limits that would make a modern clinic weep into its clipboard. Germ theory is not yet widely accepted in everyday medical practice. Antibiotics do not exist. Clean water, rest, warmth, and good food are often the most important treatments, which is awkward when the camp is short on all four. You hear a small bottle uncorked. It may hold paregoric, laudanum, camphor, peppermint essence, quinine, or some other remedy carried carefully from home. Patent medicines and domestic cures are common in the era, sold with great confidence and sometimes very impressive labels. Some contain alcohol, opium, mercury compounds, or other ingredients that would make a modern pharmacist raise both eyebrows and possibly file a report. Still, when a child coughs in the cold, a bottle feels like hope made portable. A woman rubs the child's chest, perhaps with grease or a strong-smelling preparation. The scent moves faintly through the camp, sharp and medicinal, cutting across smoke, wool, and animals. Someone heats a cloth near the coals. Someone else offers a spoonful of molasses, vinegar, onion syrup, or whatever family remedy has survived generations of being declared effective by grandmothers. Does it work? Sometimes it soothes, sometimes it merely keeps adults busy. But busy hands can steady a frightened room. There is a peculiar little belief, not rare in older household medicine, that wearing a red flannel cloth around the throat or chest could help protect against certain ailments, especially chills, sore throats, or rheumatism. Red flannel had a kind of practical magic in some families, half warmth, half symbolism, half arithmetic problem because that is too many halves. If someone in this camp owned such a strip, tonight it might be tied with great seriousness around a neck, and nobody freezing nearby is rude enough to mock it. The cold is not the only danger, but it makes every weakness louder. Chapped skin splits, wet feet invite frostbite, a blister from walking can become infected, smoke irritates lungs, poor sleep weakens tempers and bodies alike. Toothaches throb worse in cold air, a woman heavy with pregnancy, an elderly grandfather, a toddler with fever, anyone already tired from days of travel, all become points of worry in the camp's quiet map. You become aware of your own body because illness nearby makes every sensation suspicious. Is that ache in your throat just dry air? Is that chill just the night? Or the first sign of fever? Your feet are cold. Yes. But are your toes merely numb or dangerously numb? You wiggle them under the blanket. One answers, another replies late, like a lazy clerk. You decide this counts as success. Those who examine emigrant health records still debate how much mortality on the overland trails came from epidemic disease, accidents, poor sanitation, exposure, exhaustion, or pre-existing weakness made worse by the journey. Cholera famously devastated travellers in some years, especially near contaminated water and crowded routes. Though a winter camp like this has its own quieter threats, the big catastrophes get remembered. The smaller miseries fill the night's coughs, chilblains, sprains, diarrhea, headaches, cracked lips, feverish children, and adults whispering over them with no proper answer. Near the fire, someone tends a pair of feet. The owner sits wrapped in a blanket while another person removes stiff stockings with excruciating care. The skin beneath may be pale, waxy, reddened, or simply raw from cold and walking. Rubbing frozen flesh too harshly can do harm, though not everyone in 1855 understands that clearly. What people do know is that feet must carry tomorrow. They warm them slowly, breathe into hands, hold cloth near heat, and mutter encouragement to toes as if toes are livestock. A toothache begins in another wagon. You do not hear the tooth, of course, but you hear the person attached to it, shifting and groaning in short bursts. Dentistry in the 1850s exists, but not here beside this creek at midnight. A bad tooth on the trail can be treated with clove oil if available, alcohol if someone offers it, prayer if one has stamina, or extraction by a confident amateur if the situation becomes truly unfriendly. This is not a comforting menu. You're suddenly grateful for every tooth in your head behaving itself. The sick child coughs again, then cries from the effort of coughing. The sound is thin and exhausted. A mother hums, a low rocking sound. Someone offers another blanket. This is how care moves through camp, not dramatically. No heroic speeches, just a blanket passed from one cold body to another, a cup held steady, a watch shifted so a worried parent can sit close, a place made nearer the coals. The smell of the remedy lingers, camphor, smoke, damp cloth, breath. The wagon feels smaller. Every sleeper now knows about the cough, even those pretending not to. Concern travels through silence. So does fear. People have seen how quickly one illness can become many. Camp life crowds bodies close, shares cups, shares water sources, shares air beneath canvas. The very closeness that comforts also carries risk. Yet there is tenderness in the crowding. A man who complained about noise earlier now steps outside to fetch more water. A girl warms a cloth in her own hands before passing it over. An older woman gives advice in a whisper that manages to sound both kind and absolutely certain. The patient drinks. The cough pauses. Everyone listens to the pause as if it were music. You pull your blanket closer, not only against the cold, but against the knowledge of how fragile everyone is. These travellers carry iron tools, rifles, ropes, spare parts, sacks of flour, and a great many determined opinions. But they are still soft-bodied creatures under canvas. Breath can fail, feet can freeze, a fever can turn ambition into waiting. The road west is made not only of miles, but of bodies asked to continue when they would rather be left near a stove. For a while, the child rests. The mother's humming fades into a whisper, then into breath. The camp settles again, but not fully. Worry remains awake. Sitting beside the coals, it watches the sick, the old, the very young, and everyone who has hidden a pain because there is no room for weakness tomorrow. Outside, the wind changes tone. It moves lower now, pressing across the snow crust with a long, steady sound. The canvas trembles. A bit of frost ticks down from overhead. You feel the weather gathering itself beyond the wagons, larger than coughs, larger than remedies, larger than the small human circle of care. The night is not finished testing the camp. The night gathers itself beyond the wagons, and you feel the change before anyone names it. The wind that was merely cold begins to carry weight. It presses against the canvas in long, steady palms, then slips beneath the wagon bed and lifts every loose edge of blanket it can find. The camp does not wake all at once. It stirs by degrees, like a creature troubled in sleep. A rope tightens, a cover snaps, an ox shifts its hooves. Somewhere. The sick child coughs again, and the sound is almost swallowed by the weather. You lie still and listen. The storm has not arrived with thunder or drama. Winter does not need theatrical entrances. It comes as pressure, as fine snow-tapping canvas, as sleet ticking against wood, as a low moan across the open ground. The prairie becomes invisible, but not absent. It is out there, wide and white and different, giving the wind room to practice. Cold on the plains could be especially dangerous because there was often little shelter from moving air. A temperature that might be bearable behind walls becomes punishing when wind strips warmth from skin, clothing, animals, and bedding. People in the 1850s would not speak of wind chill with modern formulas, but they understood the experience perfectly. They knew that still cold and moving cold are not the same animal. Moving cold has teeth. A gust strikes the wagon broadside and the whole frame shudders. The canvas bows inward, then snaps back. Something hanging from a peg swings and knocks twice against the wood. You open your eyes, though there's little to see except darkness layered over darkness. For one unpleasant moment, you imagine the cover tearing loose and the sky entering the wagon. This does not happen. The ropes hold, the patched seams hold, the small stitched universe above you continues to exist. Excellent. Civilization survives another gust. Outside, someone calls to check a line. The words break apart in the wind. Another voice answers from near the animals. Boots move quickly through snow. You hear the urgent slap of fabric as a wagon cover is tightened. This is the kind of work that cannot wait for morning. A loose cover may let snow into bedding or supplies. A spilled sack of flour can become damp and useless. A fire scattered by wind can become danger, even at midnight, even half asleep. Camp life insists on chores with poor timing. Snow begins to find every gap. It blows sideways, not downward, because apparently gravity has lost authority. Fine grains hiss against the wagon boards and collect in corners. A tiny line of powder appears where the canvas meets the side. You watch it grow in the faint greyness and feel personally insulted. Someone near you reaches out, wipes it away with a mitten, and tucks a cloth into the seam. The cloth will freeze. It will also help. Both things can be true. There is a strange beauty in the storm, although you may not be in a generous mood. The sounds become layered and soft sleet clicking like handfuls of seed. Snow whispering along canvas. Wind humming through ropes. Animals breathing in thick bursts. The wagon feels like a boat at night. Not floating on water, but anchored in weather. You are not moving, yet everything around you seems in motion. A less familiar detail belongs to these winter camps. Snow could be both enemy and tool. It chilled feet, buried gear, dampened bedding, and hid hazards. Yes, very rude. But packed snow could help bank a fire, seal drafts near the bottom of a shelter, or provide water once melted. Though melting snow takes more fuel than one wishes to admit, you cannot simply hold a pot of snow over a candle and expect abundance. Snow is mostly air pretending to be useful. Someone outside tries to bank coals against the wind. The fire is not allowed to blaze high now. Sparks must be kept low. Fuel saved. Warmth coaxed carefully. Ash is drawn over embers so they may live until morning. A camp that preserves coals can restart the day more easily. A camp that lets every fire die must begin again with numb hands and reluctant tinder. You remember the little orange miracle from earlier and hope at least one ember keeps breathing. The animals become restless as the weather thickens. Oxen, steady as they are, do not enjoy sleet needling their hides. Mules turn their hindquarters toward the wind with practical wisdom. Horses toss their heads and stamp. A cow complains in a long, unhappy note that sounds almost human. Men move among them, checking ropes, shift in feed, making sure no frightened animal tangles itself or pulls free. A panicked herd in darkness can ruin more than sleep. One of the guards passes close enough that you hear ice on his coat crackle when he moves. His breath comes hard. He pauses by the wagon, perhaps to listen inside, perhaps only to rest out of the worst of the gust. Then he goes on. The idea of standing watch in this weather feels almost absurd from beneath your blanket. But someone is doing it. Someone always must. Weather historians and trail scholars have long tried to reconstruct how severe particular storms were from diary notes, military records, newspaper reports, and later memories. The difficulty is that one person's coldest night may be another person's ordinary misery, and a dramatic recollection written years later can frost itself with exaggeration. Yet tonight, in your bones, the distinction hardly matters. Whether the thermometer would impress a scientist is less important than the fact that your breath freezes along the blanket edge and your toes seem to be negotiating a departure. You shift slightly to keep blood moving. The person beside you wakes enough to grumble. You whisper an apology. Though the wind steals it, your knees ache. Your back has accepted the wagon board as a long-term enemy. You try to create warmth by curling smaller. But smaller means your shoulder presses into a sack and your chin disappears into wool. The scarf around your face grows damp from breath. Damp becomes cold. Cold becomes another problem. Sleeping is now an engineering project with poor funding. The storm reaches a harder pitch. The canvas rattles rapidly, a tense drumming that fills the wagon for a few moments. No one inside can pretend to sleep. Even the children are awake, wide-eyed in the dark, held close by adult arms. Outside, a loose object rolls or skids, then stops. Someone swears softly enough for history to remain PG-13. A dog barks once and is immediately hushed. The camp listens for damage. Nothing breaks. Not yet. That small fact moves through the wagon like relief. You feel it in the way bodies loosen under blankets, in the long breath someone lets out, in the return of small sounds after the great gust passes. The storm continues, but the camp has endured that minute, and sometimes survival is counted by minutes. Gradually, the sleet softens back into snow. The tapping becomes a whisper. The wind remains, but it no longer feels quite as determined to remove the canvas from the earth. The coals outside glow under ash. The animals settle into uneasy stillness. Snow gathers along wheel rims, on wagon tongues, across buckets, over footprints already fading from the evening's labour. You do not sleep deeply. Nobody does. But the weather's voice becomes steady enough to blend with breath, with the creak of rope, with the slow, guarded pulse of camp. The night has made itself the main character, and everyone else has accepted a supporting role, wrapped in wool. Listening to winter write itself across canvas, you drift toward a pale, uneasy half-dream where the storm, the wagons, and your own memory begin to blur together. You drift toward a pale, uneasy half-dream while the storm keeps writing its soft white script across the canvas. Sleep does not take you kindly. It does not arrive like a curtain falling or a candle being blown out. It comes in scraps, thin and uneven, stitched between gusts, coughs, hoof scrapes, and the stubborn ache in your shoulder. One moment you're inside the wagon, wrapped in wool and listening to sleet soften into snow. The next, you're somewhere else entirely, standing in a kitchen that no longer exists around you. Home returns first as warmth, not a whole house, not a clear face, just the feeling of a hearth on your legs and floorboards that do not move beneath you. Then come smaller things, a blue cup on a shelf, a door latch polished by years of hands, cornbread cooling under a cloth, a mother's voice calling from another room, a clock ticking in a way that means time belongs to walls, not weather. Your sleeping mind reaches for these things because the wagon gives so little comfort, dreams. Like emigrants, gather what they can carry. Many people who cross the overland trails left behind farms, towns, kin, debts, graves, churches, and familiar landscapes. And their diaries often carry homesickness in plain, practical sentences. They write about weather, miles, and river crossings. Then suddenly mention a mother, a child buried far away, a holiday missed, or a longing for bread baked in a real oven. The trail does not erase home. It makes home portable, painful, and sometimes brighter than it ever seemed when you had it. You turn under the blanket and the dream breaks. The wagon boards return. So does the cold. Your nose is uncovered again. Because apparently in sleep you have been negotiating against your own survival. You tuck the blanket higher and breathe through a small gap. The air smells of damp wool, sleeping bodies, canvas frost, and ashes. Someone nearby mutters in a dream. The words are unclear, but the tone sounds annoyed, even unconscious. People retain their opinions. A gust presses against the wagon, gentler now but still present. The canvas creaks from somewhere outside. The watchman coughs once. You imagine him walking the same small circuit, boots tracing paths that snow keeps trying to hide. Around him. The camp is a scattering of dark shapes under a pale sky. Wagons hunched like animals, oxen standing with their backs to the weather. Fires reduced to buried red eyes. Every person inside each wagon dreaming privately while held together by the same cold. Your mind slips again, this time into the future rather than the past. You see a farm that may never exist, a cabin with smoke rising straight into morning air, a fenced field, a cow in a shed, a bed with a real mattress and no sack of beans arguing with your ribs. You imagine waking there after the journey is finished, looking back on this night as proof that you were sturdy, brave, perhaps even wise. The dream is generous. It edits out the blisters, the fear, the bad coffee, and the fact that you nearly cried earlier because your mitten froze to a bucket handle. People on the trail carried all kinds of future stories. Some hope for land under donation or preemption laws, some for commerce, some for health, some for escape from crowded farms or failed prospects. By 1855, routes west had become better known than in earlier decades, but better known did not mean safe, easy, or evenly experienced. The maps could mark rivers and passes. They could not promise weather, health, harmony, or enough grass for the teams. Your dream future blurs. The cabin wall becomes the inside of the wagon canvas. The fence becomes a line of wagon tongues. The cow becomes the actual cow outside, lowing softly in her sleep or displeasure. You almost laugh, but you're too tired. Instead, you listen to your own breathing and wonder what courage really feels like. Not the loud kind in paintings, not the kind with flags. This kind is quieter. It is continuing because stopping is worse. It is putting on frozen boots. It is sharing a blanket when you wanted all of it. It is admitting, privately, that you're frightened and getting up anyway. A small, curious piece of 19th century sleep culture follows you into wakefulness. Many people believe dreams could carry warnings, messages, or moral meaning. Dream books and folk interpretations circulated widely, offering explanations for dreaming of water, fire, teeth, animals, weddings, storms, or the dead, on the trail. After a night like this, someone might mention a dream at breakfast and receive serious nods, teasing, or both. If you dream of warm socks, perhaps the meaning is that you need warm socks, at last, a symbol we can all understand. The person beside you shifts and whispers a name. Maybe they are calling someone from home, maybe someone lost, maybe no one at all. Sleep opens doors without asking whether you're ready. The whisper fades, and the sleeper sinks back into breath. You stare into the darkness and feel the closeness of memory all around the camp. Each wagon holds an unseen library: recipes, songs, grudges, letters, childhood games, family sayings, fears of failure, plans for orchards, names of neighbours, the exact sound of rain on a roof left behind. The oxen outside have memories too, if not in the human storytelling way. They know roots by repetition, voices by tone, pain by place, hunger by hour. They know the yoke, they know the morning call. Tomorrow, they will rise into duty without understanding Oregon, California, land claims, markets, or destiny. There is something humbling in that. So much of human ambition depends on creatures who simply want feed, water, rest, and not to be asked to drag civilization uphill. Students of migration still disagree about how to balance the myth of heroic westward self-making with the harder realities of loss, displacement, environmental strain, and the lives of native peoples already tied to these lands. Your cold bed makes that question feel less like a lecture hall topic and more like a troubling weight beneath the blankets. The wagon train is brave. Yes, in its daily endurance, it is also part of a much larger movement that brings conflict, upheaval, and change far beyond this sleeping camp. History rarely tucks itself neatly into one moral blanket. Very inconsiderate, really. You drift again. This time the dream is not a place but a sound, wheels turning slowly over frozen ground. The sound becomes surf, then a mill wheel, then a church bell, then the creak of the actual wagon as wind nudges it. You are back. You have perhaps slept 5 minutes or 50. Time in a freezing night becomes elastic, stretching around discomfort. The storm has eased. The silence after its hardest push is almost frightening. Snow absorbs sound, smoothing the world into a muffled hush. The camp seems farther away from itself. You can hear only close things now: breath, cloth, the faint tick of cooling metal, the soft collapse of ash. The watchman's steps are duller, padded by fresh snow. When an animal moves, the sound is slow and rounded. Your thoughts loosen: home, future, fear, memory, cold, courage, mistakes, all soften at the edges. You stop trying to sleep, which is often when sleep finally grows interested. The boards beneath you remain hard. Your toes remain uncertain citizens of your body. The blanket still scratches your chin, but the night has passed through its fiercest voice, and somewhere beneath the white silence, time is moving toward dawn. You sink lower into the narrow warmth you have made. Around you, the camp dreams its scattered dreams of kitchens, graves, rivers crossed, children grown, farms imagined, debts forgiven, biscuits that are not hard as geology. Above you, frost glimmers unseen along the canvas seam, beyond the wagons. Snow covers the evening's footprints, hiding the labour that built the camp. For now, there is only the hush after weather, the breathing of tired people, and the long wait before morning asks everyone to begin again. You wake before you mean to. There is no bright sunrise, no cheerful bird, no gentle golden promise spilling over the prairie. There is only the grey before dawn, thin and cold, pressing against the wagon canvas like water against glass. At first, you're not sure what has woken you. Then you hear it, the small, miserable industry of camp beginning again. A man coughs outside. A rope creaks. Someone stamps a boot against frozen ground once, twice, then harder, as if anger might thaw leather. An animal blows air through its nose in a long, cloudy complaint. The night is not gone. Not quite. But morning has already started making demands. It is rude that morning does this without asking how anyone slept. You open your eyes and see dim shapes inside the wagon bundles. Bedding, a hanging cup, the curve of canvas overhead, pale with frost. The inside of the cover glitters faintly where breath froze during the night. A little ridge of snow lies along one seam where the storm worked its way in. Your blanket is stiff at the edge. Your scarf is damp near your mouth and cold against your lips. For a moment, you consider remaining completely still until spring. This plan has emotional strength but poor logistical support. Across the trails, emigrants often rose before full daylight, especially when weather, river crossings, grass, or difficult roads shaped the day ahead. Wagons had to be packed, fires revived, animals fed and yoked, water fetched, children dressed, bedding rolled, and breakfast prepared before the train could move. Travel was not just the miles between camps. It was the repeated labour of turning a temporary village back into a line of wagons every morning. You try to move your feet. They answer slowly. The warm stone, if it was ever warm, is now just a wrapped lump of cold history near the bedding's foot. Someone else's foot has found it too, and both of you retreat from it in silent disappointment. Your boots wait somewhere close, though in the grey light all objects resemble one another. Is that a boot? A folded coat? A sleeping child? Best not to test with your foot too aggressively. When you do find the boots, they are stiff, not fully frozen solid, perhaps, but firm enough to feel hostile. You push one hand inside, trying to open the leather. It resists. You warm it under the blanket for a little while, because dignity is less important than toes. The smell of cold leather rises, sharp and damp. You slide one foot in and discover that yesterday's moisture has become today's punishment. The lining bites, your toes curl back in protest. You ease them forward, one by one, like reluctant settlers entering a difficult county. Around you, others wake. A child grumbles and burrows deeper, immediately betraying a sophisticated understanding of the situation. An adult pulls the blanket away just enough to create tragedy. Someone whispers that it is time. Someone else says nothing, which is the correct response when time behaves like this. Bedding is folded, shaken, and rolled. Though shaking a quilt in freezing air sends little crystals of frost into the wagon, sparkling beautifully before landing on your face. History does enjoy decorative cruelty. One person checks the supplies, flour sacks still dry, coffee safe, bacon wrap. Tools accounted for, pots returned to their place. The wagon must be packed in a sensible order, because the road will punish carelessness. Heavy goods low, breakables tucked, bedding reachable, food protected, axle grease not buried under the thing you need at noon, in the jumbled half-light. All of this feels impossible, and yet hands trained by weeks or months of repetition begin doing it almost without thought. A small practical custom appears beside the dead fire someone searches under ash for live embers. if even a coal remains. Breakfast can begin more quickly. A stick is lifted, ashes scraped back. There, perhaps. A dull red eye glows beneath the grey. The person tending it bends close and feeds it dry slivers shaved from precious wood. Smoke lifts. A tiny flame appears, thin as thread. This is not dramatic enough for a painting, but it may be one of the most important victories of the morning. Where no coal has survived, flint, steel, matches, or borrowed fire must do the work again. Borrowed fire is its own form of community. A neighbour with living embers becomes suddenly popular. A pan or shovel carries coals carefully from one hearth to another. No one calls it networking, mercifully. But that is what it is: social warmth, literally transported. The camp outside is grey, white, and brown. Snow has softened the hard lines of everything. Wagon wheels wear rims of frost. Tongues and chains lie half buried. Buckets are frozen at the lip. Footprints from last night have blurred, leaving only shallow dents where people carried water, wood, fear, and duty. The creek lies under a skin of ice again, darker in the centre where it was broken. Someone will have to break it once more. You're thrilled for them in a very distant way. The animals stir before the sun. Oxen stand heavy and patient, snow crusted along their backs where blankets did not cover them. Mules shake themselves, sending powder into the air. A horse stamps and tosses its head, eager or annoyed or both. The cow gives a low sound that says she has reviewed the accommodations and will not be leaving a positive rating. The men and older children move among them, checking legs, hooves, ropes, yokes, and feed. People who study emigrant routines still question how much the daily pace was controlled by leaders compared with the practical authority of animals, weather, water, and terrain. A captain might call the start, but an ox with a sore neck, a broken wheel, or a frozen creek could overrule any human plan. This morning, the camp schedule belongs partly to the grey sky, partly to the condition of the teams, and partly to whether hands can be made warm enough to tie knots. Breakfast is smaller than supper, quicker, less hopeful, coffee if possible, leftover bread, fried scraps, cornmeal mush, cold bacon, anything that can be swallowed while packing continues. You hold a tin cup close, letting steam dampen your face. The coffee tastes burnt, bitter, smoky, and magnificent. Your mouth wakes before the rest of you. Someone dips hard bread into the cup to soften it. Someone else eats while walking, crumbs freezing at the edge of a mitten. There is beauty now, although nobody has time to admire it properly. The eastern sky begins to pale behind a veil of cloud. Snow glows faintly blue where shadows linger. Smoke rises low, then bends in the wind. The wagons look tired but stubborn, like old ships after a rough sea. Faces emerge from scarves and shawls, red-nosed, hollow-eyed, alive. That last word matters most. A family checks on the child who coughed through the night. The cough remains, but the child drinks a little and answers when spoken to. Relief moves quietly through nearby adults. No celebration, just a softening of shoulders. Another traveller limps from a stiff ankle. Someone's fingers are cracked. Someone has lost a mitten and is conducting a search with the intensity of a legal inquiry. The missing mitten is found under a feed sack, damp but real, a triumph. An unexpected scrap of humour survives the frost when one man tries to pull on a frozen boot too quickly and hops in a circle. Grabbing at a wagon wheel while pretending this is a planned exercise, a child laughs first, then an adult, then even the man smiles, though he may deny it later. Laughter in morning cold is brief, but it does important work. It tells the body that the night did not get everything. The yokes are lifted, the animals are brought into pairs, Leather and wood creak awake, chains clink. A driver runs a hand along an ox's neck before settling the yoke. Not sentimental exactly, but careful. Wagons are checked, covers tightened, loads balanced. The village of the night disappears piece by piece. Beds become rolls, fires become ash, conversations become commands. The camp that felt almost permanent in darkness reveals itself as temporary after all. You take one last look at the place where you slept. Already, fresh steps cross the snow. Already, the road is calling everyone out of their little shelters. The cold has not vanished, but dawn has changed its shape. It no longer feels infinite. It is something to walk through. The cold has not vanished, but dawn has changed its shape. It is no longer the endless black pressure of midnight. It is a pale thing now, thin and watchful, caught in the snow along the wagon ruts and shining faintly on the backs of the oxen. You stand beside the wagon with your stiff boots on, your scarf pulled high, your hands tucked whenever possible beneath your arms, and you feel the camp turning back into a train. The transformation is almost sad. A few hours ago, this place seemed like a village, with fires, voices, animals, bedding, prayers, quarrels, and all the private warmth people could gather. Now it comes apart without ceremony. The quilts are rolled and tied, the skillet is wiped and stowed, the coffee pot, blackened and loyal, is tucked into its place. Buckets are emptied or hung, ashes scattered or left to grey beneath the snow. The little circle of human settlement loosens, and the road takes everyone again. Overland wagon travel in the mid-19th century depended on early starts and steady movement, even when a camp had endured a brutal night. The day's mileage mattered. Animals needed grass and water farther ahead. People needed to reach the next suitable camp before dark. Delays could multiply, especially in winter weather, when frozen ground, swollen streams, snow cover, or injured teams could turn a short distance into a full day's struggle. So the camp does not linger because it is poetic. It moves because standing still can be dangerous. You help lift the last bedding roll into the wagon. The canvas cover is brushed free of loose snow as best anyone can manage. Frost clings stubbornly along the seams, sparkling in the weak light. A child, wrapped so thoroughly that only eyes and nose remain, is boosted into the wagon bed among blankets and sacks. The child who coughed in the night is watched carefully, given a warmer place, and told to rest. Whether rest is possible in a moving wagon is another matter, but the instruction sounds comforting, and comfort has value even when impractical. The oxen are yoked, their huge heads lower beneath the wooden bows. Steam rises around them. The driver checks the pins, the chain, the tongue, the wheels. His hands move slowly but surely. It is difficult to feel skill in yourself when your fingers are half numb. Yet skill is there in the practiced tug, the glance along an axle, the way he listens to the wagon before trusting it. A wheel can speak through a squeak, a wobble, a stiffness in the hub. A good traveller hears trouble early, before it becomes a broken day. Someone finds that one wagon wheel has frozen into the mud beneath the snow. This produces a quiet gathering of people, because nothing attracts advice like a stuck wheel. They chip at the frozen earth with a spade and axe head. They push. The oxen lean. The wheel resists with the dignity of a small monument. Then, with a crack and a lurch, it breaks free. Everyone nearly falls forward. Nobody is graceful. Several people pretend they meant to do that. A curious little morning habit passes through the camp as people tuck last items away. Some travellers saved scraps of grease, cloth, twine, and broken bits of metal with astonishing care. What looks like rubbish in a comfortable house can become repair material on the trail. A rag can patch canvas. Grease can serve a wheel hub. A bent nail might be straightened. A strip of leather can become a hinge, a tie, a fix for something that will otherwise flap itself into ruin. The wagon train is a moving museum of second chances. Questions about the emotional experience of such mornings still resist simple answers. Were travellers mostly driven by hope, fear, economic need, family pressure, religious conviction, restlessness, or the stubborn momentum of having already begun? The evidence shifts with each diary, each family, each route, each loss. You can feel all of it at once while standing in the snow. The night has been miserable, yet leaving it behind brings relief. The road ahead is hard, yet staying would be worse. Human beings are complicated creatures. We complain about moving, then fear stopping. The captain gives the signal, or perhaps the movement simply begins at the front and passes backward wagon by wagon. The lead team strains. Wheels turn. Snow crunches. Iron rims grind over frozen ground. One wagon creaks forward, then another. Chains tighten with bright metallic notes. Drivers call to oxen in voices still rough from sleep. Children peer out from canvas openings. A woman walks beside her wagon with a shawl over her head, one hand resting briefly on the sideboard as if saying farewell to the night shelter before it disappears into memory. You begin to walk. At first your legs feel wooden, as though the cold has carved you badly. Your knees are object, your boots bite, your shoulders remember every board beneath the bedding. But motion brings a little heat, not comfort, exactly, but circulation. That humble miracle. Your breath comes out in white clouds, your scarf grows damp again, the snow beneath your boots gives way with a crisp, tired sound. Behind you, the camp is already less visible, the fires are dark marks. The place where the wagons stood is a pattern of churned snow, hoofprints, ash, and flattened ground. By noon, wind may soften it. By tomorrow, another storm may hide it completely. A whole night of labour, fear, care, hunger, jokes, coughs, and uneasy sleep can vanish from the land almost at once. History often works like that. It leaves a record in bones and memory before it leaves one in soil. The wagons groan onward, their canvas covers, pale against the morning, look almost peaceful from a distance, which is a deeply unfair visual trick. You know what is inside them: stiff blankets, sore people, guarded supplies, tired children, and all the little objects that make a family believe it is still itself while moving through strangeness. The road ahead runs through whitened grass and low grey light. No one says the night was easy. No one needs to. It sits in everyone's posture. Yet there is courage here. Not polished courage, not heroic courage, but the quieter kind that survives being cold, hungry, worried, cramped, and still responsible for the next task. It is in the woman adjusting a child's scarf without missing a step. It is in the driver's hand resting on the ox's flank. It is in the person who shared embers before dawn. It is in the tired joke about the frozen boot. It is in you, placing one foot ahead of the other while the camp falls away behind. The coldest winter night has not become pleasant simply because it is over, but it has become past. That is something. The wagons carry it forward invisibly, along with the smell of smoke in the blankets and the memory of canvas rattling in the storm. You walk beside them into the pale morning, and the wheels begin their old song again. Now the road stretches softly ahead, white at the edges, grey in the middle, fading into a horizon that does not hurry. The oxen breathe slowly. The wagons creak more quietly now, as if even the wood is tired of complaining. Your footsteps find a steady rhythm in the snow, and the rhythm begins to smooth the hard corners of the night. The storm has passed behind you, the fires have gone to ash, the camp has folded itself into wagons and bundles and sleepy faces wrapped in wool. Nothing needs to be solved in this final moment. The road will keep its questions for later, for now. There is only the hush after hardship, the pale morning light, and the small warmth still kept beneath your coat. You breathe in, gently, and let the cold air become softer in your imagination. The prairie opens on every side, wide and quiet, but it no longer feels empty. It holds the tracks of those who walked before, the low patience of animals, the fading smoke of breakfast fires, and the tender stubbornness of people who kept going. The wagon wheels turn, slow and round, slow and round. Snow whispers underfoot. A child inside the canvas has fallen asleep again, rocked by motion, somewhere behind you. The night is already losing its sharpness, becoming a story that can be told beside another fire, in another season, when the blankets are dry and the hands are warm, and as you listen to the creak of wood, the soft clink of chain, the long breathing of oxen, you may let your own breathing settle too, in and out, warmth held close, darkness left behind. The morning road carrying you onward, not quickly, not perfectly, but gently enough. So let the wagons drift farther into the pale distance, let the snow cover the restless tracks, let the last ember of the old camp dim without fear. You are safe here, in the quiet after the telling, wrapped in the softest part of the story, while the wheels turn lower, slower, and finally fade into a whisper. Sweet dreams.